The next day, Lee Sunji stood frozen in front of the research institute. He wondered to himself, had it really been 6 months since the second stage of the national service exam ended? A faint smile appeared on his face as memories from the past drifted in. It felt like just yesterday he was chatting with street merchants, helping them count and solve arithmetic problems. Simply because he was bored, he chuckled softly. But every time his father found out, he'd get scolded. Thankfully here, his talent for arithmetic was actually appreciated. Though his days were never easy, every moment in this place felt captivating. His daydream was broken when Kim Jung-ju and Park Jae-hoon approached. "Oh, researcher Lee Sunji, are you all right?" they asked politely. Sunji turned with a sarcastic smirk, his tone dripping with mockery. "Heh, stop teasing me. You two really don't know how to greet your superior properly, do you? Can't even handle basic arithmetic, and now you've forgotten how to bow." He glanced at them with a sly grin and added, "Maybe your heads are too light to bow, since there's nothing inside them." With a relaxed stride, Sunji walked away, leaving his two colleagues fuming in frustration. A few days later, Lee Sunji met Professor Jahan and a young man who accompanied him. "This is Amir, my younger brother I told you about," Jahan introduced with a warm smile. Amir clasped his hands together and bowed respectfully. "Peace be upon you. I'm Amir Hassan from Persia. Please take care of me." Lee Sunji returned the gesture with a friendly smile and a slight nod. "I'm Lee Sunji. I hope we can share our knowledge and learn from each other. Please, guide me well." The three of them walked slowly, chatting casually. Jahan started the conversation, his voice calm but meaningful. "The main calendar we use today was originally born from Persian astronomical calculations." "That's true," Lee Sunji replied, his eyes shining with admiration. "And I must say, your Korean is very fluent." Jahan chuckled and patted his brother's shoulder. "Amir may not be great at arithmetic, but when it comes to Korean, he's even better than me." As they approached a large shelf filled with books and ancient scrolls, Amir pointed and said, "This is where all the books about calendars are kept. If there's anything you don't understand, just ask me or Jahan." Suddenly, Sunji's eyes lit up with excitement. To him, all of this was simply arithmetic, the paradise of numbers. That night, within the silent grandeur of the palace, Hyang walked alongside his attendants. His mind was heavy and his steps slow. Astronomy in this era wasn't merely a tool to measure time. It was a bridge to understand the will of heaven. Only through precise calculations of the stars could a king anchor his authority and divine legitimacy. That's why an accurate calendar, a true calendar for all 8 provinces of Joseon, was something that could not be compromised. Suddenly, Hyang stopped in his tracks. From afar, he noticed a bright light still glowing from one of the rooms. His lips moved slightly as he muttered under his breath, "Who's working this late at night?" Inside, Lee Sunji was scribbling furiously on his notes. "Oh, so they use this formula. Let's calculate and double-check it." Hearing a voice behind him, he turned around in shock, only to find Hyang standing there, watching with an unreadable expression. "What has you so focused?" Hyang asked. Startled, Sunji let out a small curse under his breath before quickly bowing. Good evening, Your Highness." Hyang smiled faintly. "You're quite dedicated, researcher Lee Sunji." He walked over to the table, glancing at the sketches spread across it. "What has you so absorbed that you didn't even notice me standing behind you?" Adjusting his hat nervously, Sunji replied, "Your Highness, first, I was reverse engineering the arithmetic formulas from old records. I've been recalculating the proper dates for rice sowing and planting, comparing the equinox and solstice from the published calendars, then backtracking to find the average deviation." Hyang stroked his chin, thinking to himself, as expected. He approaches it from a practical standpoint. "These equations, I don't understand them at all. This is completely different from the arithmetic I learned before." After a moment of thought, he asked, "What do you think the biggest problem is right now?" Sunji rubbed his chin. "There are several, but the biggest issue is that the calendar system is far too complicated. Too many variables, leap years, leap months, leap days, and errors in seasonal terms. These can be controlled by adjusting records according to the Ming Dynasty's methods, but..." Hyang interrupted. "So, revising the current calendar is pointless?" Sunji nodded. "Yes, Your Highness. The errors persist no matter how many times we revise it. We have to fix it every year and make adjustments every 2 or 3 years. I believe that makes no sense. Truth should be simple." Hyang pondered for a moment, then looked at him. "So, these equations are part of your attempt to recalculate astronomy from the ground up?" Sunji nodded firmly. "Yes, if the movements of the sun and moon can be expressed through formulas, we could establish a far more accurate calendar. But I'm not competent enough to find the right solution. If I'm considered incompetent, then the Joseon Research Institute should just be disbanded altogether. You can't get accurate results while clinging to a geocentric model." After a pause, Hyang asked, "What if we changed our perspective? Have you ever heard of the concept of reversal of perspective? It's about flipping front and back, top and bottom, trying to think in an entirely different way. I came across this idea in a book written by a Westerner." Sunji looked uncertain, trying to grasp the meaning behind the Crown Prince's words. Before he could finish processing it, Hyang suddenly said, "By the way, I'm hungry. Have you eaten?" Sunji tried to politely decline, but before he could finish his sentence, Hyang interrupted, No, I can't allow my people to go hungry. Come with me. Those words made Sunji's face flush with happiness. Then Hyang led him to another room. This is a place we've prepared for all the researchers. You can come here any time to rest. At that moment, several court ladies entered, carrying trays of refreshments. As the aroma filled the air, Lee Sunji exclaimed, "Wow, it smells amazing," Hyang gestured politely. "Please, enjoy." This is rice cake made with 9 herbal ingredients, served with honey tea. Without hesitation, Sunji took a bite. The moment the rice cake touched his tongue, he froze. A burst of flavor spread through his mouth, leaving him speechless. "It's delicious," he murmured. Hyang sipped his tea and asked, "My father also enjoys this dish. Does it suit your taste?" With eyes sparkling, Sunji replied, "The flavor is so unique, bitter, salty, and sweet all at once. It's my first time tasting something like this." Hyang nodded. "It's already quite late." These were prepared by the court ladies from the Eastern Palace. During the day, they usually stay in the tea brewing room. Since the ingredients are rare, these cakes aren't served often, but you're welcome to ask for tea or snacks anytime you'd like. It's getting late, so I'll take my leave. You should head home as well." Hyang excused himself. Sunji quickly bowed. "Yes, Your Highness. Your kindness knows no bounds." As Hyang walked away, he thought to himself, "What do you think, huh? The best facilities for my institute staff. Once they experience this, they'll never want to leave. Stay healthy and keep working for a long time." After Hyang left, Sunji slumped into his chair with a long sigh. "Is this not a dream?" he whispered, resting his chin on his hand in awe. "It's unbelievable. The Crown Prince truly cares for his subordinates. No wonder the Joseon Research Institute runs so well. There must be some kind of system that makes the sun, moon, and stars revolve around the earth," he thought. "I can grasp it to a certain extent, but something feels off. Concepts and transformations, front and back, top and bottom." Lost in thought, Sunji held his head. "At this rate, I'm the one who's going to start spinning." Suddenly his eyes widened. "That's it! Spinning!" He jumped to his feet, rushing back to his desk and scribbling frantically. Wait, what if the center of rotation isn't the Earth? As dawn approached, Lee Sunji was still writing and sketching. His eyes were bloodshot from exhaustion, but his expression was filled with satisfaction. "That's it!" he shouted, leaping up so hard his chair fell over. He looked up at the sky, exhilarated. "The center of the universe isn't the Earth. It all makes sense now." One morning in the Eastern Palace, Hyang was drafting a document to send to the Ministry of War. He handed it to Scholar Jung and asked, "Has there been any report from the calendar team?" "I haven't heard from them in a while," Jung Inji replied with a frown. "You haven't received anything?" "There's a strange rumor about Sunji. They say he's gone mad, and he hasn't gone home for several days." Hyang's eyes widened in disbelief. Meanwhile, in the Institute's break room, a strange sound echoed repeatedly. Lee Sunji sat hunched over his desk, quietly laughing to himself. The deputy director of the Institute frowned and scolded the Hassan brothers. "How could you two keep something this important from me?" But Professor Jahan shook his head. "That rumor must be false. Sunji told us he'd go home after finishing his work." The deputy sighed. "If the Crown Prince hears about this, he'll be disappointed." The next day, the deputy director opened the door and found Sunji still at his desk. "Look at you, Lee Sunji. Why are you staying up all night again?" When he didn't respond, the deputy lightly patted his shoulder. "Hey, can't you hear me? No matter how dedicated you are, you still need to pay attention to your surroundings." At that touch, Sunji's body slumped forward onto the table, startling the deputy. Sunji murmured in his sleep, "I burned it all, Your Highness." The deputy sighed in relief, realizing he was only asleep. What on earth has he been doing all this time? He hasn't gone home for days. Is this what he's been working on? Then what is— He picked up the sheets scattered across the desk. "My goodness, what is this?" Professor Jahan came closer, his eyes widening. "This is incredible!" Amir joined him, nodding in awe. "This approach is truly remarkable." Suddenly, someone tapped the deputy director's shoulder and asked, "So, what exactly are you all discussing?" The deputy replied, "This is a discovery that could have a massive impact." The person pressed further. "Oh? And what kind of discovery is it?" Annoyed, the deputy snapped, "It's a finding that could turn the entire world upside down. Stop bothering me and see for yourself." When he turned around, the deputy froze in shock, realizing who he had just yelled at. Immediately, he bowed deeply in apology. Hyang chuckled softly. "It's all right. So, what is you all so serious?" The deputy replied, "These are the equations calculated by researcher Lee Sunji, Your Highness." Inside, Hyang thought to himself, "I've seen these before, but they were already difficult to understand back then. But this time, he's done it. He's accounted for the annual parallax to measure stellar distance. Did he calculate it based on observations of Venus? Maybe he hasn't realized it yet, but parallax is the clearest proof of the heliocentric model." A faint smile appeared on Hyang's face. It'll take more detailed observations to refine the calculations, but the very fact that he reached this conclusion at all is extraordinary. Turning to the deputy director, Hyang said, Take Lee Sunji to the rest chamber immediately, and summon a physician to examine him. The deputy bowed. Yes, Your Highness, Hyang added firmly. Keep this secret from the king until his work is complete. Yes, Your Highness, they all replied. Someone nearby muttered while looking up at the sky. It's not the heavens that move, it's the earth. He lowered his gaze to his feet, frowning. But then, how am I still standing upright? Does that even make sense? The deputy director murmured under his breath. I've gone over his calculations myself. There's nothing wrong. Everything checks out perfectly. Could it be that everything we've believed until now is wrong? Lost in thought, he looked up, only to find Hyang standing before him. You seem troubled, deputy, Hyang said. He hesitated. Your Highness. Hyang smiled gently. When your mind is tangled, a walk is the best way to clear your thoughts. With small, steady steps, they strolled down the palace corridor. This situation reminds me of when we discussed calendar reform not too long ago, the deputy began. Hyang smiled faintly. Yes, that time we debated whether it was the sun or the earth that moved. The deputy nodded. Right. Back then, I thought Your Highness's idea was absurd, and that you were just being stubborn. Suddenly, memories of their heated debate came flooding back. What does this mean? The deputy had exclaimed when he saw the modified design of the armillary sphere. This can't be right, Your Highness. The center is the sun, not the earth. Hyang had blinked, confused by his sudden outburst. The deputy continued. The sun and moon revolve around the earth, right where we stand. That's the teaching of the sages. Hyang froze for a moment, realizing his mistake. I forgot. In Joseon, people still believe the sun revolves around the earth. How can I change their understanding without relying on direct observation? Professor Jahan broke the silence. In my homeland, there were also people who believed that, but they were executed in religious trials. Honestly, I somewhat believe in this theory myself. Hyang smiled faintly at Jahan's comment, though it offered little comfort. The deputy is correct, Hyang said calmly. This theory is based on telescopic observations first made by a Western scholar named Copernicus. The deputy frowned. If you wish to say that the sages of the West are right while our sages are wrong, then you must provide undeniable proof. That's unlike the wisdom Your Highness usually shows. Hyang sighed in mild frustration, then said, Very well. Let's suspend the armillary sphere project for now. Back in the present, the deputy spoke again, his voice quieter this time. I consider myself a rational scholar, but it's not easy to accept the idea that the sages might not hold the ultimate truth. Even when I understand the logic behind it, it's still hard to accept. Hyang looked ahead and said calmly, Whether it's the sun or the earth that moves, the dawn will still come. That is the order of nature, unchanging and eternal. Now tell me, do principles like loyalty, duty, cause, and effect ever change? Do the teachings of the sages ever change? In the end, we are merely uncovering the workings of nature itself. Our duty is to uphold the teachings of the wise, to protect the lives of the people. The deputy froze, struck by Hyang's words. He couldn't find a single word to respond. After a long silence, Hyang changed the topic. Well then, let's get back to work. Yes, Your Highness, the deputy replied respectfully. A month later, at the Royal Research Institute, Lee Sunji walked slowly, holding a small round object with trembling hands. Suddenly, Hyang appeared and grabbed his hand. Wait, did you buy that from the market? Startled, Sunji nodded. Yes, Your Highness. Hyang turned to a court attendant. Attendant, bring him one of those. The attendant quickly returned, carrying a tray filled with identical round pills. Seeing them up close, Sunji's eyes lit up with excitement. Hyang raised his fist confidently and said, These are genuine mind-clearing pills made by our royal physician. Take one, recover your strength, and give your best during your presentation. Fighting. Without hesitation, Sunji popped the pill into his mouth. Thank you for your generosity, Your Highness. But, fighting? What does that mean? Hyang froze for a second, realizing he had accidentally used an English word from the future. That. It's a kind of ritual phrase. It means gathering all your strength into your chi center and using it to its fullest. Hearing that, Sunji immediately patted his stomach and exclaimed in awe, The chi center in the abdomen? You're right. I can really feel the pill's energy gathering there. Hyang stood speechless for a moment, unsure how to respond. Finally, he smiled awkwardly and said, Well then, I'll take my leave. See you soon. Some time later, the powerful voice of King Sejong echoed through the Grand Royal Hall. The regular assembly for today has concluded. However, there is a special report that must be presented. All officials except the heads of the 3 ministries and 6 departments may leave the chamber. Yes, Your Majesty, the ministers replied in unison. In the lower rows, the left state councilor whispered to the chief state councilor. Have you heard anything? The chief glanced briefly toward the crown prince and murmured back. Not yet, but it seems this concerns His Highness. Then King Sejong raised his voice. This is a special report from the Joseon Research Institute. At that moment, the grand palace doors opened. A young man entered, bowed deeply, and declared, This humble servant, researcher Lee Sunji, pays his respects to Your Majesty and His Highness the Crown Prince. I've heard much about you, said the king. They say you're quite skilled in calculations. So I grant you permission to speak. Present your findings on this new calendar, not just to me, but before all civil and military officials gathered here. His words instantly sparked murmurs of astonishment across the hall. A new calendar? They whispered in disbelief. Standing before the royal assembly, Lee Sunji nervously held a single sheet of paper. I, Lee Sunji, will now begin explaining the new calendar created by the Joseon Research Institute. Meanwhile, Hyang held his breath. A sense of unease filled his mind. Will arithmetic reasoning alone be enough to convince these scholars? Kim Jium listened intently, his expression serious and unflinching. Several other ministers appeared restless, their hands clenched tightly, as if trying to suppress their growing anxiety. After what felt like an eternity, sweat beating down his temples, Lee Sunji finally concluded his explanation. His voice trembled slightly. That concludes the report on the calculations for the new calendar system. Thank you for your attention. The chamber fell completely silent. Officials exchanged uncertain glances, but no one spoke a word. Only after several deep breaths did King Sejong's calm yet commanding voice break the silence. Your hard work is commendable. This theory is truly impressive. He then turned toward the Crown Prince. Hyang, do you have anything to add? Hyang took a step forward, his tone clear and steady. Your Majesty, we've compared the new calendar's records with past solar and lunar eclipses. There were no inconsistencies. If the ministers wish to visit the Joseon Research Institute, all our records are available. I can also demonstrate the full calculation process for this calendar. Soft murmurs spread across the hall. Faces that had been tense moments ago began to show traces of excitement. King Sejong nodded, pride shining in his eyes. It seems Joseon will finally have a calendar system of its own. This is the method we've perfected, Father, Hyang said respectfully. The king turned toward his ministers. What are your thoughts? Chief State Councilor Lee Jik spoke first, his expression bright. Your Majesty, with logic and precision this strong, we believe it is time to implement the new calendar system. But, the left state councilor interjected. Wait, there's something we must not overlook. Hyang inhaled deeply, whispering inwardly, I knew it. It was never going to be this easy. In his imagination, he pictured the old scholar rising angrily. This theory claims the earth is round and revolves around the sun. That's blasphemy. The world doesn't work that way. But in reality, the left councilor said calmly, once this is compiled into a book and distributed to local government offices, it will eventually reach the Ming dynasty. Such wording could spark conflict. Hyang blinked in surprise. How can such a conservative old scholar be this pragmatic? He's not even angry. Wait, does that mean he accepts the theory? The left councilor continued, his voice calm but razor sharp. The earth is said to be flat, and at its center lies the Middle Kingdom. If they hear even a single phrase suggesting the earth is round, they'll seize upon it. Unreasonable demands will follow, and Joseon will find itself in a difficult position. In truth, the left councilor already knew the earth wasn't flat. But out of respect for the Emperor of Ming, he chose not to challenge that belief. The sun remains still and the land moves. What an extraordinary idea. What mattered most wasn't the literal truth, but the realization that Earth was not the center of the universe. These young, inexperienced scholars had proven it through mathematics. Indeed, as Confucius once said, learning is everywhere, and in the pursuit of knowledge, age, rank, or social status mean nothing. A faint smile formed on his lips. Heliocentrism, huh? So, the Earth moves? It's been a long time since I've felt this spark of curiosity. I want to study it further, reflect on it deeply. King Sejong's steady voice pulled him back to reality. No matter how high one's position, you're willing to risk your dignity to protect the truth. Is there a way we can prevent this discovery from causing problems with the Ming dynasty? The left councilor bowed slightly. Your Majesty, perhaps we could emphasize that this is merely a natural principle. However, such a claim would require substantial supporting evidence. Very well then, the king said. Crown Prince, do you understand what must be done? Hyang lowered his head respectfully. Yes, Your Majesty. We'll gather more evidence and further strengthen the theory. King Sejong turned to the ministers. And what will you do? Lee Jik replied. We'll refine the logic to emphasize that this is a principle of nature and not a challenge to the Ming dynasty's authority. That way, everyone will understand their respective duties. Good, said the king firmly. Work together and begin preparations immediately. Especially you, Minister of Rights. You bear the heaviest responsibility. The Minister of Rights bowed. I will do my utmost to carry out the royal decree. The assembly that day ended, and on the way home, the Minister of Rights grumbled, Ha! Why did the Crown Prince do something so pointless? Suddenly a voice cut in from behind. Minister of Rights, do you really think it was pointless? The minister startled and cried out, My goodness, it's you! Of course it's pointless. We've been running the calendar system fine all this time. Why risk provoking the Ming dynasty? The left state councilor couldn't hold back any longer. He erupted in anger. Have you forgotten how many lives were lost because the old system couldn't predict the seasons accurately? If something's wrong, it's the official's duty to fix it. He lowered his voice and added, A servant of the state must act with the integrity demanded by their office. Realizing his mistake, The Minister of Rights immediately apologized, but he was ignored and left standing. Watching the left state councilor walk away, he murmured to himself, puzzled. How strange. He's changed recently. He's advocating for both the ministers and His Highness. The Minister of Taxation chimed in. It's not just him. The other two state councilors are the same. The left state councilor clenched his teeth in frustration. Even from a distance, he could hear their conversation. If the seasonal calendar is inaccurate, the people will starve. His Majesty will punish the responsible officials. In the end, the three councilors will bear all the blame. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. Suddenly he turned, stomped the ground, and strode back in a flash of fury. The left state councilor advanced toward them, his aura darkening, rage burning in his eyes. The two ministers went white as the left councilor thundered, Instead of wasting time complaining about others, why don't you do your jobs properly? Why should I bear the king's wrath while you walk free? If you want a peaceful life, hand in your resignations now. I'm tired of always carrying your mistakes. His shout rang out so loudly the birds scattered in panic. Meanwhile, inside the palace, Hyang stood before everyone. Thank you to all the researchers who helped develop our national calendar. Thanks to your efforts, we have overcome a major obstacle, he continued firmly. Now it's time to build a prototype. The ministers fell silent, hanging on every word. The hall was tense. All eyes were fixed on him. Hyang turned and asked, Deputy Director, what do you think about constructing an armillary sphere based on a heliocentric system? The Deputy Director smiled and replied, It seems you're reproaching me for past errors. Very well, I accept it. Hyang nodded decisively and added, Prioritize everything needed for accurate observation. I will handle location and funding. He sealed it with a command. Everyone, move quickly. We accept your orders. The researchers answered in unison. Night fell. Two shadowy figures slipped into the palace grounds, nimble as spies on a secret mission, checking every corner with utmost caution. One pressed himself against a wall and peered sharply at the guards. Suddenly a hand signal from the darkness, a sign from an insider. The infiltrator was the left state councilor, who was escorted in at once. A servant whispered, Welcome. Everyone's been waiting for you, the left state councilor replied. Yes, take me to them. Apologies for being a little late. Don't worry. Moving at night isn't easy, one of them said. Now that everyone's gathered, let's begin the meeting of the three state councilors. At first, it was an ordinary meeting. They drank soju and exchanged gossip. Chief State Councilor Lee Jik opened the conversation. Today I got some sharp criticism again. Mayang Sajong, the right state councilor, snapped back. Then why not leave everything to the Crown Prince and the king? What do you think the king really wants? The left state councilor Hwang Hee answered. And considering the reforms ahead, which might follow the establishment of a monopoly trade office, the eventual goal is military reorganization. If that's the case, I'll leave it to the ministers of the military department. The next morning at the palace, the king sat in silence, his expression filled with doubt. The left state councilor spoke up. The current method places too much burden on the farmers, Your Majesty. Therefore, it would be best to combine both methods in a balanced way. The king stroked his beard thoughtfully. A reasonable suggestion. Let's test it out in several regions first. That night, during another secret meeting between the three state councilors, the atmosphere was unusually cheerful. We made it through today without any criticism. It almost sounded like praise, one of them said with relief. The chief councilor grinned. Let's make these meetings a regular thing from now on. I agree, another replied. So, what do you think His Majesty's next concern will be? In my opinion, the next focus will be the military sector, especially weaponry. And so, the three of them spent the night deep in discussion, ultimately deciding to conduct an inspection of Area 51 together with senior officials from the military department. A few days later, the left state councilor arrived at Area 51 with the high-ranking military officials. Hyang hurried forward to greet them. Welcome to Area 51, councilor and honored officials. Greetings, Your Highness. We didn't expect you to welcome us in person. The purpose of today's visit concerns this official document. Hyang accepted the scroll and read it carefully. A faint smile formed on his lips as he grasped its contents. It turned out the document wasn't from the king. It was their own initiative. So, Hyang said, you want to know whether it's possible to supply firearms to the provincial troops? The calculations aren't difficult, but it would be better if you saw the manufacturing process yourselves. Both sides had their own motives. Hyang wanted the ministers to see firsthand how urgently the craftsmen in Area 51 needed support, while the state councilors wanted to gauge the king's intentions through the crown prince's reactions. Inside the weapons workshop, Hyang led the tour. Blacksmiths worked tirelessly, hammering glowing metal as sparks flew through the air. The guests were shown a wide array of weapons and armor, unfamiliar yet fascinating. Like a child proudly showing off his toys, Hyang introduced each invention with eager enthusiasm. After the tour, the delegation mounted their horses and returned home, their minds filled with new plans and possibilities. Later that evening, Lee Jik asked curiously, So, how was your visit to District 51 today? Without a word, the left councilor handed him a rolled-up document. What's this? Asked the chief councilor. The left councilor replied, A request from His Highness the Crown Prince? His rhetoric is quite persuasive. The chief counselor chuckled. Ha 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 ha. Instead of solving problems, he just creates new ones, doesn't he? The right counselor added with a smirk. Exactly. It's like we've been enchanted by a fox's spell. The Crown Prince is just as difficult as the king, the left counselor said, sighing. Only in a different way. And once he ascends the throne, I fear the ministers will have an even harder time. The three counselors then fell into a deep and serious discussion, carefully planning the materials and arguments for the next royal assembly. Meanwhile, in the royal palace, the king sat surrounded by his ministers. His expression was stern, the atmosphere tense and heavy. Now, he began, let us discuss military reform. The current system moves far too slowly. I am deeply disappointed. Let's hear your thoughts. Seizing the opportunity, Huang He presented an idea he had long kept to himself. It would be irrational to overhaul the entire weapon system at once, Your Majesty. I propose we first form small-scale firing units within local camps, then train elite commanders capable of leading them effectively. The king turned to Hyang. So, not central troops, but regional forces. What do you think, Crown Prince? Hyang bowed respectfully and replied, in my opinion, if this is combined with the military reform plan I proposed earlier, the results will be far more effective, Your Majesty. Inwardly, Hyang reflected, history has shown that local forces were often neglected, always viewed with suspicion as potential rebels. Since the Song dynasty, and even after the reigns of King Taejo and King Taejong, central authority kept tightening its grip. There were small improvements under King Sejong, but King Sejo's coup reversed them all in the name of control. That structure endured for centuries, and ultimately weakened Joseon. I can't let that happen again. If the ministers are now motivated to strengthen regional forces, then I'll support them wholeheartedly. Huang He continued confidently. Exactly. Your previous reform plan already established the separation between civil and military authority. The first step is to legalize decentralization while promoting synergy with the economic sector. The new firing units will be stationed along the northern borders and the eastern and southern coasts. However, if command remains under central authority, then commanders must be rotated regularly. To Huang He, this was the most ideal strategy, minimizing risks while maintaining balance. King Sejong and Hyang both seemed impressed by his proposal. He concluded firmly, when forming these new units, the number of troops and firearms must be calculated with extreme precision. Then, in a calm yet commanding voice, the king ordered, Vice Minister, present that report to me. The king slowly unrolled the document and read it carefully. As expected, the biggest issue remained the iron supply. In an even tone, he asked, what is the current status of iron production and demand? A minister stepped forward respectfully. Your Majesty, as the Minister of Public Works, I have mobilized nearby farmers to begin mining operations. Some of the iron is also used for farming tools and household necessities. For a brief moment, an image flashed through King Sejong's mind. Exhausted farmers digging under the dim light of torches. He sighed deeply, then spoke with authority. This method is inefficient. Find a way to secure a stable and consistent iron supply with uniform quality. All the ministers bowed in unison. We will carry out Your Majesty's command. After leaving the palace, the three senior counselors gathered again in a quiet corner. Huang He smiled in relief. Well, I didn't get scolded today. One peaceful day at least, he said contentedly. Sajong replied proudly, the look on the king's and the crown prince's faces today. I'll never forget it. They began to weave their next plan. First step, Huang He suggested to Lee Jik. We recruit the Minister of Public Works to our side. Lee Jik nodded slowly. Agreed. He's close to the crown prince. That connection could prove very useful to us. In another part of the palace, the king strolled leisurely beside the crown prince. A few days ago, the left state councilor, Huang He, visited Sector 51, said the crown prince. I was surprised to find that he actually agreed with me. The king chuckled softly. I too was taken aback by Huang He's attitude this morning. A faint smile curved his lips, a sign that change was on the horizon. You're right, father, replied the crown prince confidently. We've been too slow. It's time to move faster. At that very moment, the three senior counselors elsewhere felt a sudden chill in the air. Sajong instinctively rubbed his arms. Why is it so cold all of a sudden? He muttered. I feel it too, another replied. Let's head inside and rest. Scholars, farmers, craftsmen, soldiers, and merchants, they are the pillars of a nation. Centuries later, that same phrase would cross the Tumen River and reach the Korean peninsula, but its meaning would change, transforming into Joseon's rigid social hierarchy. Scholars sat at the top, revered and respected, while merchants were placed at the bottom, looked down upon by all. At the palace gates, a craftsman stood with a heavy tool bag slung over his shoulder. Suddenly, he knelt and bowed deeply toward the grand palace buildings. A young man nearby approached curiously. Why are you bowing here? He asked. The craftsman rose slowly, wiping the sweat from his brow, and replied respectfully. As a humble commoner from the countryside, I couldn't help but pay my respects upon seeing the palace where our king resides. Hyang's gaze sharpened as he noticed the man's arms, marked with burn scars. Burns. Probably from the forge, he thought. Then he asked calmly, "You came to apply as a craftsman for the military department, didn't you?" The man's eyes widened in shock. How did you know, my lord?" "Yes, that's right. Attendant," Hyang ordered, "summon the guards. Have them escort this craftsman to the military department." "Yes, your highness," the attendant replied. Before leaving, the craftsman bowed deeply, his voice trembling with gratitude. "Thank you, my lord." Hyang smiled warmly. "Very well. I wish you good fortune." As the man departed, Hyang's face brightened. So, the recruitment of craftsmen has officially begun today, he thought. Once I'm done at Area 51, I must stop by and see it for myself. After all, this entire movement had started because of him. Following the last inspection, all craftsmen from the military department had been relocated to Area 51 and other associated research facilities. This measure was meant to ensure the success of mass weapon production. On that basis, King Sejong issued a strict royal decree. Every weapons workshop in the nation must send 5 apprentice craftsmen to join the military department. Because of this policy, a wave of sweeping change spread throughout the kingdom, touching everyone from nobles and farmers to merchants and laborers. In a humble village home, the rhythmic sound of hammer against metal filled the air as a blacksmith worked diligently on repairing a farming tool. Suddenly, a voice called from outside. "Daeokchil, are you home?" Startled, he quickly threw on his clothes and stepped out. "Yes, chief. The hoe will be ready by tomorrow." But the village chief shook his head. "This isn't about the hoe. A royal official is here to see you." A man in a red robe stepped forward, his tone firm and authoritative. "You there, are you the blacksmith of this village?" Daeokchil stammered nervously. No, sir. I'm not a true blacksmith. I just picked up a few skills on my own. I only repair broken farming tools." The official sighed deeply, giving him a sharp look. "Don't be modest. I've seen your work. Clean, solid, and precise. The blacksmiths in the military forge are growing old. One by one, they'll retire soon. We need new hands." Daeokchil froze, completely stunned by the offer. The scene shifted to the day of the recruitment exam. The sound of clanging metal echoed through the air, mingling with the heavy breaths of the nervous participants. The selection and skill assessments were strict, everyone giving their all to prove their worth. Then a commanding voice rang out, cutting through the noise. "Enough! Everyone stop! Now, carve your names and numbers onto these iron plates," shouted Jung Cho. Suddenly, Hyang appeared. "Minister of Public Works, am I late?" The Crown Prince smiled. "How's the examination going?" Jung Cho replied, "As ordered, we gave each participant the same furnace and iron, and we are judging who can refine it best." Hyang nodded approvingly. "All of them have experience working in regional military workshops, so their skills don't differ much. This way is fair. Even those who lose will accept the results." The next craftsman was called in. Daeokchil stepped forward, his eyes widening in disbelief as he took in the sight before him. "Isn't that the young noble I saw this morning?" he thought, stunned. Hyang turned to Jung Cho and instructed, "Those who fail this exam will be assigned to Area 51. Filter out only those truly unqualified. Then select half of the most talented candidates and send them to the ordnance cell. According to the reform plan, the number of craftsmen in the military barracks will increase by 300 per year and up to 600 under government supervision." Daeokchil couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. He whispered to the supervisor beside him, "Sir, if I may ask, who is that handsome young man?" The supervisor smiled faintly. "That's the Crown Prince. If you work here, you'll see him often. He even treats commoners like us with respect." Tears welled up in Daeokchil's eyes, his hands trembling with emotion. The supervisor bowed. "Respectful greetings, your highness." Hyang nodded, then said warmly, "You craftsmen, keep up the good work." "And you, still bowing like that, huh?" Daeokchil trembled. "Forgive me, your highness." This humble servant simply wished to pay his respects. Then Hyang's voice filled the entire hall, firm, powerful, and full of conviction. "Listen carefully," he declared. "There are no lowly people here." He clenched his fist, his eyes shining with passion. "The skill of forging iron is the solid foundation of the Joseon my father dreams of. How could you ever call yourselves lowly? You are the pillars of this nation's prosperity. It is your spirit that will save us all." Then, in the middle of his speech, an idea struck him. "Iron, nation, no, a national company." Suddenly his eyes widened in realization, and he took off running, brimming with excitement. "Thank you for the inspiration," he shouted as he dashed away. Jung Cho blinked, utterly confused. Did His Highness just say something about saving the nation? Lee Jik nodded quietly and murmured, "Indeed. Truly, His Highness the Crown Prince possesses 3 virtues, brilliance, virtue, and a flawless physique." Meanwhile, King Sejong issued a firm royal command. All government officials must ensure that the iron supply remains stable and standardized. Because of this decree, the Ministry of Tax officials couldn't sleep for days. They ran back and forth, scrambling to collect data. Chaos spread like wildfire. Has the Minister of Public Works replied to this memo yet? This section is wrong too. Minister of Taxation Kim Ji-um slammed his desk, face red with frustration. Just following orders is already killing us. Now the ministers are piling on even more work. Such is the curse of being trapped in this endless chain of bureaucracy. The next day, in the grand hall of the palace, Kim Jum stood upright, his voice heavy as he presented his report. I, the Minister of Taxation, humbly report to your Majesty. Forgive me, but the plan your Majesty proposed is facing serious difficulties. King Sejong's face looked weary, dark circles shadowing his eyes. Rubbing his temples, he muttered softly, "No matter the plan, the main problem always comes down to the budget." Jung Cho, the Minister of Public Works, bowed respectfully and added, "Your Majesty, even though we've diverted most of the supplies transported through land routes, there's hardly anything left to allocate for weapon production." Then the Minister of Military Affairs spoke up. "To solve the budget issue, Your Majesty, we must first address the problem of tax collection. However, the preparations for that are still incomplete." The room descended into chaos. Reports and complaints overlapped one after another until King Sejong could barely make sense of them. His eyes closed, but his thoughts drifted far away. One question lingered heavily in his mind. Hyang. Have you foreseen all of this? When King Sejong finally dozed off, a voice echoed faintly in his ears. "Your Majesty. Your Majesty." He stirred, half-conscious, his eyes still heavy. "I'm awake. Hasn't it only been an hour since I fell asleep? Is it morning already?" "No, Your Majesty." "It's me, Hyang." At the sound of his son's voice, King Sejong immediately forced himself awake. If Hyang had come at this hour, it could only mean something of great importance. There, before him, the Crown Prince was kneeling on the floor in deep reverence. Still drowsy, the king murmured, "What is it, my son?" Keeping his head bowed, Hyang spoke with utmost respect. "Forgive me for disturbing your Majesty's rest, but there is an urgent matter that cannot be delayed. Please pardon my intrusion." King Sejong let out a quiet sigh, then gave a faint smile. "Very well. Tell me, what brings you here?" Hyang took a deep breath and looked up, determination burning in his eyes. "Your Majesty, I have found a solution to our iron supply problem, but before I explain it, may I ask one question?" He paused, then continued firmly. "Do you truly believe, Father, that there is a hierarchy between scholars, farmers, craftsmen, and merchants?" This video ends here, but the story isn't over yet. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next part.